The man joining me right now has been North Dakota's Attorney General since 2000. He is currently running, seeking the NDGOP nomination to be governor. And his name's Wayne Stenehjem. Wayne, welcome to the program.
Good to be with you, Rob. How are you?
Pretty good. Hey, later in the program, we're going to be talking about best albums from the 90s. Are you a music fan? You got a favorite, something you want to throw in?
I don't.
You don't. See, I like to ask the questions to kind of surprise you right off the bat.
Okay, I don't have any that I'd announce right now.
Okay, I will. You know, you got to think about it a little bit, right?
Okay.
You got to remember. You get to a point where you got to try to think which albums came out in the 90s. I don't even remember anymore.
I was more of a singles guy, a 45 guy, so
okay.
And I had thousands of them in Grand Forks, and unfortunately they were in my basement during the flood, and I lost about 4,000 45s. And
that's terrible.
But they dated before the 90s.
I was a 90s kid, so I'm going through that depressing where sort of some of the iconic albums that came out in the 90s now, it's like, you know, Weezer's Blue album is now 20 years old, and I'm like, oh my, I'm old. My daughter, we'll get to the interview here in a moment. My daughter had a bunch of friends over, a bunch of her teenagers, and I was playing some of my 90s music on my computer, and I heard one of them in her room say, "Oh, I love old music like this." And a little part of me died,
I was at a record
Wayne.
shop not that long ago, and somebody was looking at a album of the Beatles, and they saw Paul McCartney, and they looked at it and said, "I did not know Paul McCartney used to be in a group."
Oh boy! All right. Well, I suppose we better get to some questions here. One of your opponents, Doug Burgum, hitting the television airwaves today with an ad, and had a jab for career politicians. Now, when I watched that, obviously you've got a long track record in state government. You've been Attorney General since 2000. You were a longtime state lawmaker before then. He's kind of getting a jab at career politicians. Do you think of yourself as a career politician? What do you think when you hear that?
It is apparent, and I saw that when we had our debate last week, that he had tested some ideas. One of them apparently is that a career politician is not a good thing, and also came out in favor of term limits, which have been on the ballot in North Dakota 3 times and defeated 3 times in North Dakota, because citizens of North Dakota know that they have term limits and they can exercise that at the ballot box each and every election. So, I don't know that career politician is a bad thing. I think that it's important to note that the position that I now hold and have since 2000 is not an appointive position. It's not one you inherit. It's one you earn because you get elected by earning the trust of the citizens of North Dakota. And so I've been proud to have served the last 16 or 15 years as Attorney General. Before that, I was a state lawmaker for 24 years, but that's, of course, not a career. It's a part-time position. You come down to Bismarck for 4 months every other year, and then I went back to Bismarck and ran my business and lived under the laws like everybody else had to, which would be something that maybe our congressional folks might benefit from. But I don't know how he's ever going to square that with the fact that we have Senator Hoeven. He was elected full-time office the same year I was in 2000. Now he's looking for another 6-year term. If he wins, and I suspect he will, he'll have 22 years. And I hope it extends beyond that, because it's important we have that experience. I don't know if he's going to claim that Senator Hoeven is now a career politician, or what he's going to do about Governor Dalrymple, who has been a full-time state official since 2000 as well, just as long as I have. He was in the legislature for years before that, and Doug Burgum served as his honorary chairman, donated thousands of dollars to his campaign, supported him, and for good reason he supported him. But I don't know why this sudden shift, except that he conducted a poll that says that maybe some people don't think that's a good thing. But as for me, I've been elected these years, and I think I've earned the trust of the citizens of North Dakota, and I think that the citizens want somebody who's got experience in running state government, and if they agree, then I'll win the election.
Do you feel, and it's about 701-293-9000 if you want to join the program, 888-970-9329. Question or comments, we can certainly get you in. You can also email talk@wday.com. Nationally, there's sort of this, it's the year of the outsider. You've got Donald Trump at the top of the polls. On the left, you have Bernie Sanders, who, while not beating Hillary Clinton, is certainly running a very strong campaign. You look at that sort of nationally sort of anti-establishment, I guess, anti-status quo. And here in North Dakota, there was a poll came out. And first of all, the poll is very good for you. Showed you, beating Mr. Burgum 59-10. Also showed, though, that North Dakota's right track, wrong track went from, about 80% of people saying, we were on the right track down to about 60% of people saying we're on the right track.
Yeah, I think it was 63%. I think, and that's better than 2-1 because there were a number of people that were undecided about that. Okay. That's still pretty good. I think that it's a good indication that the citizens of North Dakota feel that they're getting good service from their elected officials and feel that we're on the right track here in North Dakota. That is a number that any state would envy, and though it's down a little, I think it's still pretty strong. And that is in stark contrast to the view of most North Dakotans about how things are going in Washington, D.C., and little wonder where nothing seems to be going right, and they don't seem to be able to agree on anything. And I think that as far as what's happening in North Dakota, we have a good thing going for us, even with the downturn. And, of course, we all worry about what's happening with the price of oil and farm commodities, but we've managed it well, and I think we're well positioned into the future as well.
Do you worry if that number starts to drop, that maybe sort of this career politician, status quo candidate, some of that stuff might just start to get traction, maybe hurt your campaign?
Well, of course you worry, and we're ready, and of course in due course we'll be responding and doing our own commercials, reminding everybody that things in North Dakota have been going pretty well. There's a reason that the Wall Street Journal has said that North Dakota is the best run state in the union, not once but 4 years in a row. And of course there was that poll, I think you even had it on your blog, saying that the citizens of North Dakota have by far the greatest amount of trust in their elected public officials here in North Dakota, coming in ahead of another fine, trustworthy state, Wyoming, by a lot. And so I think those kinds of things are indicative that the citizens of North Dakota, though not everything is perfect, of course, but that things are going well for us here.
701-293-9000 if you want to join the program, 888-970-9329. I tell you what, Patrick, why don't we take the break here? Wayne, you can hold through the break?
Yep, I can hold till 3:30, right?
Yep,
right?
Perfect.
Okay,
absolutely.
great.
Yeah, I have a couple more questions, and of course we can get your calls and questions in. 701-293-9000, 888-970-9329. I'm Rob Port in for Jay Thomas. We'll be right back. Don't go away. My guest is Attorney General Wayne Stenehjem, who of course is one of 3 candidates for governor vying for the Republican nomination to run for governor. Toll-free number, 888-970-9329. Email me, talk@wday.com. Wayne, I had a couple other things I wanted to talk with you about. First of all, was something that your 2 opponents, State Representative Rick Becker and, of course, Fargo businessman Doug Burgum, brought up in a recent debate. They were talking about an amicus brief you filed you signed on to in the King versus Burwell case. I wanted to, Mr. Becker said, I quote, Mr. Stenehjem also filed an amicus brief with 23 other Democrat attorneys general in King v. Burwell, which was identified as the last hope to overturn Obamacare. Mr. Burgum said, I find that shocking that our Attorney General would be the only Republican on that list, along with Democrat Attorney Generals in California, New York, Massachusetts, and other places, and that's, again, disappointing. What's your response to that?
Well, I think that the first thing to mention is that nobody in North Dakota has fought harder against Obamacare than I have. I was among the first to file that lawsuit in conjunction with a number of our Republican attorneys general and a couple of Democrats right after that law was enacted, contending that it violated the Commerce Clause, the 10th Amendment, and a variety of other constitutional provisions. Unfortunately, when it got to the Supreme Court by a 5-4 vote, we were unsuccessful, even though we did establish that it was a violation of the Commerce Clause to require that somebody buy a product in the the market that they didn't want. Nonetheless, that became the law. And here in North Dakota, as in other states, every state had to decide, are they going to establish a state exchange for a marketplace for people to purchase insurance, or are you going to forego doing that and have a federal exchange? North Dakota opted, and Representative Becker voted this way, not to establish a state exchange. There are a number of reasons for that, partly because they were logistical problems, there were software problems, and these state exchanges didn't seem to be working very well. But one of the reasons was that the legislature in North Dakota believed that because you're required to buy insurance, but you get a tax credit for the insurance premiums that you pay, that was available whether you had a state exchange or a federal exchange. And after the legislature declined to establish a state health care exchange, this lawsuit came along saying that only individuals who were involved in a state exchange were entitled to a tax credit for the premium that they paid. I think that is a bait and switch. People were promised that because they're required to buy this insurance and were promised that they would get a federal tax credit when they did so, that it would be unconscionable to tell these thousands of people that were relying on the tax credit to help pay the cost of their premiums that the state of North Dakota was now going to take a bait and switch approach and say that you're not entitled to that tax credit. That is something that is terribly unfair to those folks who were led to believe that that's what would happen. That's part of the reason the legislature did not adopt its own state exchange but went with the federal, thinking that the federal tax credit would apply irrespective of which route you went. And so that's the reason that I felt, in keeping with what the legislature did and in keeping with what I think would have been a certain firestorm. What would have happened if the Supreme Court had overruled that law? Those folks would have not been entitled to that tax credit, and I think that is the wrong approach. The better thing is to do what we have been attempting to do all along: get the law repealed on the federal level, get legislators and a president elected who will repeal it, and take that approach rather than to use the taxpaying citizens of North Dakota as pawns in this game. It just didn't seem right to me.
How did you end up as the only Republican? I mean, I think that's what they're kind of saying is you were siding with the Democrats on that. How did you end up as the only Republican?
Well, I look at these things without a political agenda in mind, but a legal one, and try to uphold what it is that I think the legislature, the policy-making branch of government, intended. And before I did sign on, I did talk to a number of legislators, the governor, and others, because I don't just jump onto these, and ask for their perspective on, is it true that we did not adopt a state exchange because we believed that you would still be entitled to a tax credit for the premiums you were forced to pay? And the answer I got was yes. That appeared to be the position that the legislature of North Dakota had taken, and so it was the position that I thought was appropriate to take. It went to the Supreme Court, and they agreed with our position by a vote of 6-3. But there are other ways and better ways than pursuing this through court, by the way, to overturn Obamacare. And I hope that that's what winds up happening.
You had asked, sort of rhetorically, what would have happened if the Supreme Court had overturned the law, and I think what you're arguing is a lot of people who were told or went in, I guess, signed up for policies thinking they were going to get subsidies would sort of have
thinking they would have gotten a tax credit. They would not have gotten the tax credit that they thought that they were entitled to, and that they were led to believe that they would have. And believe me, there are thousands of those people here in North Dakota who would have been in that position.
What do you say to people who say that was our last chance to overturn Obamacare?
Well, I don't think our last chance. Our last chance is not something that will happen through the court. It needs to happen through the legislative branch, through the political branches, through the Congress, and through the presidency. And that's why this election coming up is so very important.
Another question. I'm sorry. I thought we had Darren on the line with a question, but it looks like he dropped off. 701-293-9000, 888-970-9329. You want to join the program, you can also email me, talk@wday.com. I'm wondering there were three debates between the candidates last week. You were at the one sponsored by the NDGOP in Bismarck. You were not at one sponsored by local Republicans in Rugby. You did not participate in one held by Valley News Live that the other two candidates were in. You've gotten some criticism for that. Why just the one debate?
I guess because people who are behind in the polls always want to have a lot of debates. I think that we need to remember there are three legs to this governor election, and the first one is the one we're in right now. That's the convention. That's where we go and attempt to persuade the party activists, the strongest volunteers, those who are coming to our convention, that we think that we have earned and merit their support. That's where we are now, and so I've been traveling all around the state for most of January, all of February, attending just about all of the 47 local district conventions, and that's where we are now. And so I thought that there's no harm in participating in one debate that the party sponsors pre-convention. That's the one that we agreed to, and I thought that since we're in the convention phase of this struggle at this point, that it should be one that the party sponsored, and it was well covered. It was carried live on television, live on the radio. It was even streamed. I've heard from people all over the country who watched it on their computer, so it was very well covered. And I think people like debates a little bit. I think people might be getting a little weary of them on the presidential level, but I thought one debate for now is good. People were asking for it, but I didn't hear people asking for three debates in 4 days. The next phase, of course, is the primary, and there no doubt will be debates and additional public forums. I've already gotten requests for those, and we'll be participating. And then, of course, the general election. We are still 8 months away from the election, and the citizens of North Dakota will have plenty of opportunities to learn all about the different candidates.
Wayne, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
You bet, Rob. Thank you, and you have a nice weekend.
You as well.
And I'll think about my 90s album and email you.
Yeah, there you go. We're talking about it at 4:30, so if you can email it by then, we'll get it in.
All right.
All right, thank you so much. Rob Port in for Jay Thomas. That, of course, was Attorney General Wayne Stenehjem. More to come straight ahead, 701-293-9000, 888-970-9329. We'll be right back. Don't go away.